actual beer.
All right. Hey, everyone. Our morning is rolling on, whether you're just joining us after our beer and yoga session and you're all limber and ready to learn a little bit more about women in beer social media. So good morning to all you West Coasters like me out there, everyone else. Good afternoon and welcome to our Women in Beer social media panel. So as we all know, Instagram has really become one of the perfect platforms to capture craft beer, whether it's the perfect pour shot, an engaging giveaway, sharing the news of a new release. Breweries and influencers alike have really carved out this amazing world and universe for craft beer social media. So if you haven't already, follow us at Hop Culture Mag. Had to do a little plug there, and I'm sure all the wonderful ladies joining us will also hopefully give themselves a little plug as well, but you can see their handles underneath there. So speaking of everyone that you guys can see right now, we have 4 super rad women that have successfully built their own or helped build a brewery's social handle, and also grappled with some of the tough experiences of being a woman in the industry. This is a Women in Craft Beer Festival. This is Beers Without Beards. And so we're really going to get into not only how to build a successful social media brand, but also what it means to be a woman and some of the challenges that we face in the industry. So without further ado, I'm going to give just a quick intro to everyone that's joining us, and then have them introduce themselves because they definitely know themselves the best. So to my, I guess it's my left or right there, Helen, you probably know her better as at Hop Snobbery. She has over 22,000 followers on Instagram and was listed as one of Men's Health's 30 female beer lovers you must follow on Instagram. So give us a wave, Helen.
Hey guys.
Next to her, we have Alana Cushman. She is the marketing and events coordinator for Lawson's Finest Liquid. So one of the top breweries in Vermont and around the country. They have over 73,000 followers on Instagram, and she's crafting some just absolutely gorgeous photos. If you haven't had a chance to see them, definitely check out at Lawson's Finest. Hey, Alana.
Hey, everyone.
And then down below me, we have Alicia Valensky. She is the founder of Work for Your Beer. So she started an organization with her co-founder that essentially creates these spaces where people can come and engage in fitness and breweries and just with beer in general. So nice tie-in to coming from our beer and yoga session that we just had. You can find her at Work for Your Beer. What's going on, Alicia?
Hi.
And then finally, last but not least, we have Melissa Papilla. She's an avid traveler, dog lover, has an absolutely amazing following of 88.5 thousand followers. It's coming to us from Vancouver up in Canada.
Hi.
So we're going to get into it here. Just a reminder that I see people are already posting in the comments section, but we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in there. We'll monitor them and then get to them with about 10 minutes left in the panel to chat a little bit more about some of your questions. So let's get things rolling. I did a quick intro of everyone, but I would just love everyone to go around again and tell me a little bit more about who you are, how you became interested in craft beer, and kind of your whole journey from starting with that first Instagram post to where you are today. So Melissa, could you start us off and tell us a little bit more about your journey?
Why me? Of course.
The lucky one.
Lucky first one. So I'm Melissa, the girl with beer. I don't know. I wish I wasn't going first. I do social media marketing for the hospitality industry. I just moved back to Canada back in May. Before that, I was the communications manager for Green Flash and Alpine, both brands. And here I work as a social media manager for a hospitality group. I run the accounts for about like 11 different accounts. Other than that, I have my second handle, Melissa Around the World, and that's kind of how I got into Instagram. And I was just sharing more beauty and lifestyle and travel and powerlifting related content there. And so once I started getting interested in like the beer Instagram world, whenever I posted a beer photo, people were kind of like, why are you always drinking? Are you an alcoholic? Like it just didn't fit in with the audience I had built on there. So I decided to start a second different account. And I was actually in Portland, we were heading to the Guard the next day for either like an anniversary party or a release party. I can't remember. I was there like a few times in that 2-year period. So my friend Jason, he told me about this one account, Sort of Candid. So Tiffany, she's not as active anymore, and she was, posting about the beers she liked, and she was more fashion forward. So I was like, oh my God, there's like an entire community for this. So I started posting. I wasn't really consistent with it at the time. And then about 2 years ago in April, I was like, okay, I'm going to grow the Girl with Beer. So I just became really consistent, posting at least 5 times a week, spending hours a day, just like engaging with other people. And then I would collaborate with other content creators because I lived in San Diego at the time, and it's such a craft beer hub that like people I was talking to on Instagram, they were coming through and they would be like, hey, you want to grab a beer together? I was like, of course. And then that would end up with us posting for like on each other's accounts and then kind of growing our followings that way. And then, yeah, that's how I kind of grew the Girl with Beer. And how I got into craft beer, honestly, like this started back in university. And whenever I tell the story, people laugh at it. But like during exams, I would go study at our pub because I went to school in Canada. We have like campus pubs like that are run by the Student Federation. So it would have cheap beers. And during exams, like the libraries would always be packed and loud and noisy. So I would just go to the pub and have a beer and just go through the top list and kind of do that because I felt like studying wasn't a chore when I was having a beer, especially if it was like a creative project I was working on. So that's how I got into it. And then my husband, like I met him in university, and throughout the years, we both just kind of developed a interest in craft beer together and started traveling to breweries together. And then that kind of just fueled the Girl with Beer. That was a really long-winded way of telling my story.
No, I love that. I mean, hearing a little bit more about everyone's background and story and how they got into that, and the story of how you were studying in a pub, which is something that you can't really do here in the U.S. A really unique story to hear how you got into craft beer. Alicia, I want to kick it over to you to introduce yourself because I think your story is really interesting because you built your social media handle along with a business at the same time. So tell us a little bit more about Work for Your Beer.
Yeah, for sure. So Work for Your Beer essentially is a directory of all the places that you can work out and drink beer or cider or wine. We consider ourselves alcohol agnostic. But our focus has always been beer, which is why our name pertains to beer. And so really it started, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina after college. And I only knew one person there, my friend Mel, who I had gone to school with. And I was working from home at the time, and I was like, oh God, how do adults make friends if they don't have like office mates? Like how do you do that? And so I looked at a local events calendar and I saw that a brewery nearby had a weekly yoga class, and it was $5 for the beer and the yoga. Like you paid $5 altogether and got a pint and a yoga class. And I was like, oh my God, I have to go there. Went, loved it. I had never done yoga before, but I was like, it's at a brewery. How hard can it be? At least I get a beer at the end, even if I'm terrible. And so I went, I loved it. And then word of mouth just started like talking to people, and they were like, oh, did you know this other brewery also has one? And this other brewery also has a run club and whatever. And so being the type A person that I am, I started keeping it all in a Google spreadsheet. So that I would know when the things were and, which activities were happening where and who led them and how much they cost and whatever. And then as I would meet people, I'd let them know that I had this spreadsheet and they'd ask for access to it. So I started sharing with it with them. And then probably 40 people into that spreadsheet, my friend Mel was like, business idea. Let's turn your spreadsheet into a website so that we stop sharing a janky spreadsheet with a bunch of people. And I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. You're making a lot of sense right now. So we did a Kickstarter just to kind of test the waters and see if anyone would care if we did this, and immediately knocked it out of the park. People were like, yes, absolutely. I need to know where these activities are. And Work for Your Beer was born. And so we started in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're now in 6 cities, and we have our sights set in 2021 on hopefully reaching 20 cities. And it's just the 2 of us. We add these event information all to our website, and we let you know what's going on in different beer-centric cities. Like if you like yoga or run clubs or bike rides or boot camps or anything like that, so many of those things are happening at these breweries. We also include trivia because we like to say you're working out your mind. But basically, it's just this group of really like-minded people who like to work out and drink beer and make friends. And that's our tagline, because that's what we do. And building a community around that on social media has been, honestly, I mean, it's challenging in that you need to know the technical components of social media, but I'm a travel writer by trade. Mel is a photographer and digital marketer by trade. Like, it felt like fate that we were supposed to do this thing and build this brand and this community of just very like-minded people.
Yeah, and how many ideas or businesses have been started over a beer?
Right?
I wish there was like a statistic. And with that in mind, Helen, tell us a little bit more about how you started Hop Snobbery.
So I started Hop Snobbery. Well, before I was Hop Snobbery, I was just myself. My Instagram was just my name, and a friend of mine had introduced me into craft beer, and my first beer was called Commotion, which is a American Pale Ale by Great Raft Brewing. It's in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and I had never had beer that I had liked before, and I took a sip, and I was like, holy crap, is this what, craft beer tastes like? Like, is all beer like this? Is it all this good? And I wanted to know more, and I wanted to drink more of that and things like that. So I just started finding local beers that I could try, and I would post them on my personal Instagram, and I suddenly started gaining followers. And then I was like, all right, well, I guess I should make this like a real thing. Like, that's where Hop Snobbery came from. I was just talking with a friend. I was like, well, you like hoppy beers. You are kind of a hop snob. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, Hop Snobbery. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. And that became me. And I switched over to the Hop Snobbery name because I wanted to find more beers. I wanted to show people what other beers were out there as well. And yeah, it took off from there, and it kind of blew up really quickly, and it was completely unexpected, and I'm happy that it happened that way.
Yeah, and Hop Snobbery, I mean, I feel like that's a great story because it really tells us how it represents you as a person and as your brand. And I think that kicks us over really nicely to Alana. You are the only woman in beer social media joining us from an actual brewery who's handling an actual brewery account. So tell us a little bit more about when you started working for Lawson's and your experience with Lawson's Finest.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing experience. I joined the team 2 years ago. We're actually coming up on the anniversary of opening our taproom, brewery, and retail store in Waitsfield. And it's been an incredible experience. I've always admired Lawson's Finest Liquids from afar. Like, Sip of Sunshine was it. And I moved to Vermont about 6 years ago. And that's where I really started to fall in love with the industry. It's like, what do you do in Vermont? Like, you hang outside, you do stuff like that, but then you go to breweries. And so my love for the industry just came from, mapping out what breweries I was going to hit with my friends and my camera and then, fast forward years later, I was just poking around and I'm like, no way. Lawson's Finest Liquids is hiring someone to, do their marketing and social media. And I'm like, this would be killer. And I was living about, an hour away from Waitsfield, and, fast forward a couple weeks, I got the job, and I've been here, the past 2 years, and it's been a whirlwind. Sean Lawson was the one who managed the social media account before I came on. And it was just, he'd post when he could. It was never, an everyday thing. So being able to come in and really build the social media platform on, various accounts and, really highlight our beer with some high quality photography, totally launched our online presence. And we've had steady growth over the past 2 years. I think since I started, we've gained almost like 50,000 followers. So it's been pretty cool.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know that you gained 50,000 followers within the last 2 years. I was going to, I think that rolls really nicely into the first kind of big overall question that I had for everyone to really give us a base for the rest of our discussion. Craft beer has exploded in popularity, obviously here in the US, but also in the consumption of beer media, and especially on Instagram. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about what you guys have seen specifically in this rising trend. So I guess, Alana, we can start with you because you're kind of getting into it already, but even in these last couple of years that you've handled Lawson's social media account, how have you seen your social media change, or what did you put in place with Lawson's social media account to help gain those 50,000 followers?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you kind of like test things out, and I'm very fortunate to work for a brewer who is incredibly talented. So the beer speaks for itself, and then my job is just to make it look attractive and really pull the attention of people that we have online. And so it's like I've tested various things out, and I find that the posts that get the most love are really centered around our and information behind the beer and the process that goes into it. And we at Lawson's, we have this program called the SIP program. It's social impact program. There are various projects within that where our beer is doing good, and we've been able to donate money to various organizations that are really close to everyone's values here at Lawson's. And so I find that like the two of those beer and doing good for the world with beer has just been this beautiful pairing together. And it's been interesting to watch the trends over time. But I find that with our following specifically, it's like classic and good solid background information and just an inside look on how everything goes down here.
Yeah, I think everyone, wants to get kind of that behind the scenes look at what's going on at the brewery. It's not often, maybe we can't travel to Vermont to go to Lawson's Finest, but be able to see the beer either in the beautiful environment in Vermont or some of the behind the scenes about what people are actually brewing or doing or what Sean's doing in the brewery. It's able to be like pulling back the curtain and giving that sneak peek. Helen, I think you started Hop Snobbery about 5 or so years ago in 2015 or 2016. So how have things changed? Mm-hmm. How have you seen things change these last 5 years or so?
One thing that is super noticeable is the amount of people that are now showing up on social media purely interested in craft beer, and especially the women, the new female accounts that are popping up. And I took a break for a long time, and when I came back, I was like, holy crap, like who are all of these beautiful, intelligent women, and where have they been hiding? And it's like, oh, they just started their accounts. And that's been amazing to see, is seeing more women, this is perfect for this panel, more women showing face and being like, hey, I'm a female, I love craft beer, I'm learning more about it, getting into that world. And I think that's just super, super cool how many people are just coming up, especially women, and showing their love for beer and their knowledge for beer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've taken a lot of steps and a lot of strides in this industry, over the last 5 or so years. I think we still have a lot of work to do. But, that's why we have panels like this and festivals like this to help spread the word and show all the achievements of women that are working in or drinking or consuming in the industry. Melissa, I wanted to get back to you for a second. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I know you mentioned you also worked as communications manager for Green Flash and Alpine. Why is Instagram and social media such a great platform for the craft beer industry?
I think it's a great way to build a community more than a following. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of overlook. And I saw a question, I know we're waiting to answer questions, but it was kind of like how social media has been effective for breweries to fight the limitations because of this pandemic. And I feel like the breweries that built a community online were able to survive a lot better than the ones that didn't even have an online presence. It's not about building following, it's building a community, engaging with people in that community. And I find that like a lot of breweries won't interact with other breweries online, like on Instagram. And that's such a shame, because the whole reason I love the craft beer community is the friendship and the collaboration. So if they're not, unless like it's a business collaboration, they're not like commenting on each other's stuff and like showing up on different accounts, or even influencers. Like I feel like a lot of breweries are still a little hesitant about influencers and like, I don't know about that. But like, as I've mentioned, like I started my Instagram journey doing beauty and travel. So like I was getting sponsorships from beauty brands like way before, and now like finally craft breweries are just like, oh, there is value in influencers, but there's still some that are like not understanding it either. So yeah, I feel like people who build communities have definitely benefited from it, and Instagram makes it easy because it's free. Like, yeah, you to start, it's free. Like the barrier to entry is low as long as you have the tools like a phone and with a camera and the content, you can enter and anyone can start it. And that's the greatest thing. I think the people who put in the time to grow are the ones that benefit from it. The ones that breweries or like individuals trying to build a following, once you see how hard it is, like, and you leave, then you don't get the benefits from it. So it's definitely building that community and focusing on the community and authentic like interactions versus going after vanity numbers.
Mm-hmm. I love that little kind of I don't know, vignette that you just gave us, that building community versus building followers. I think that's so important. And especially, Alicia, when you started Work for Your Beer, you also kind of started it as a company in tandem with your social media. So how did social media figure into Work for Your Beer from the start?
I think it's funny. We didn't necessarily think of Work for Your Beer as a business to begin with. It was Mel and I being like, okay, we want to get the word out about this. Like, I'm a writer, you're a photographer. I think that our social media brand could be the best way to get people on our website. And then it grew into this thing where it was Mel and I being just like our authentic selves and going on our craft beer journey. And then people really connecting with us as individuals versus like the company. And so it's been really interesting to watch that shift. I will say one thing I've seen really shift, to Melissa's point, is the idea of quality over quantity. So I think at the start of this whole social media boom for craft beer influencers, it was very much like who has the most followers, who has the most likes, who has the most whatever. Now I think it's really shifted toward, okay, you can have a zillion followers, but like how engaged are those followers? Do those followers trust you as a resource? Do they look to you as a person that they like believe in terms of beer, in terms of your recommendations? Like, are you genuine? Are you authentic? I think too, there's this, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Men can be creepy. So on social media, especially when you're two, like, women in your 20s and 30s and you're drinking beer a lot and you're like being sassy and fun, you can get some creeps. We have felt very lucky that 70% of our followers are women who are coming to us because they're like, listen, you're educating us and entertaining us on the topic of beer and fitness. And like, I can trust you as a resource. And this is like a creep-free zone. And so I think being able to foster that sense of community and to be like, listen, we came into this not knowing anything about beer. Now, this isn't even a brag, but I'm like a level 1 Cicerone. Like, we're at least learning. Like, we want to understand more about it. We want it to be like this thing that we're passionate about. And so we're diving into. And I like to think that that hopefully inspires some of our followers who are just weaning into craft beer or weaning into fitness to do the same thing. So I do think a lot of it is, content quality over, follower count, quantity, etc.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up that point because, I really want to get into, I think which is really the heart of our discussion and why we're all here is because you're all amazing women that are really just killing it in the industry. And that's what Beers Without Beards. I got tripped up on my own. I came up with a name for the festival and I just tongue twister. But that's what Beers Without Beards is all about, is really bringing women together, not only to celebrate the achievements of women in all roles of craft beer, but also to create these communities and cultivate these conversations where, like you were saying, Alicia, we feel comfortable because there are some barriers to the industry for us. And that's just how it is because it's a very, predominantly white male industry. And so there are barriers for women. There are barriers for people of color. There are barriers for, lots of different people. And so I really want to get into, what it's like for you guys posting as women and as Instagram influencers or handling a business's account, as a woman, when you're creating a social media post, do you really consider your audience? Do you consider your brand? And how do you craft your post to that perspective? Helen, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, but you took a break from posting for a little bit, and we actually featured you in an article on our site, hopculture.com. And you mentioned that some of the pressures to the industry just made it, not fun anymore. And I think it took a lot of courage to step away, take a break, and then come back. So tell me a little bit more. Do you feel an extra weight or duty to represent women in beer? And how do you deal with that?
Yes and no. In the beginning, which added to the pressures, in the beginning, it was like I had to make it known. I mean, obviously I'm a woman, but like I had to make it known that I am a female in the craft beer industry that loves craft beer. I don't know everything, but I don't claim to know everything. But what I do know, I know, if that makes any sense. And the pressure was there to, what's the word? How do I say this? It's like the pressure was there to always be on point with all of my knowledge, and just the people there nagging you like, what do you know? You look all this crap up on Google or whatever those other, there's like some sites where you can get, I don't know, but like there was always like the doubt, like people always doubted me, and there's like a way I want to say this and I don't want to mess it up, but I'm nervous, so I'm probably gonna mess it up anyways. When I took a step back, it was because the numbers constantly flying through my head, having to meet certain expectations. I don't have to be on point all the time, and it took a lot for me to realize that, but I have to remain confident in myself and what I do know and how I portray myself and, the things that I say. Before I took the break, I stopped posting pictures of myself because it was taking away from what I wanted to convey and the message I wanted to convey about the beer because of all those trolls and haters and, people, yeah, I don't know.
No, I definitely understand.
Definitely know.
Yeah,
I think we all know.
Yeah,
definitely know what you mean.
We all share in what you're saying. There's just kind of this unwritten pressure, behind like you have to work that much harder, as a woman in the industry, just because you're not the majority, and so you really have to find your own path and your own outlets and your own way, and hopefully your own community in order to connect with, which Alicia was mentioning. That they're really trying to instill with Work for Your Beer. I know, Alicia, you also said that are you studying for your level 2 this round now?
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, do you feel that pressure to really like have more knowledge as a woman in the industry?
Yeah, it's so funny to me because it's just like, I would love to go out into the world with the blind confidence of a mediocre white man and just be able to like fraud my way through everything and pretend that I know but not know, and no one gives a shit. But unfortunately, that's not how it tends to go. And so I do feel like when I show up to a brewery, there have been times where I'll order an IPA because I am an absolute hophead, and men are like, it's going to be pretty hoppy. Are you sure? Or like, the bartender, and I'm like, okay, so clearly you are not following Work for Your Beer and you don't know that I know what I'm talking about. And like, that's fine. But I do feel that immediate pressure to be like, okay, but I've studied in these ways, and but I have tasted all these beers, and but it sucks to feel that pressure. I think a lot of the times we're putting it on ourselves. Like, I think a lot of the times if we could just let that roll off our back and like go on and prove that we know our shit, it would be significantly better. But I do get caught in that trap all the time. I mean, Mel, my partner, and I, we recently started a video series where it's called We'll Take the Lot After Harry Potter. And we taste every single beer on tap. And we kind of talk through our tasting notes as well as so many tangents. But we talk through our tasting notes and we both, pick out what we smell, what we taste, like all of the different components of the beer itself. And at first people were like, you guys are just reading the menu. Like, you guys were already told all of this. And we were like, you're welcome to think that. But like, this is how we're learning in real time in front of you. We're being our most authentic and like real selves. And I think even in studying for the level 2 Cicerone, it's been the same thing of like, I'm not going to sit here and feel like I'm taking the SATs. And if I don't have the knowledge in here, something's going to explode. Like, it's a relatively expensive test and I want to pass it. But more than wanting to pass it and to have like the shiny honor, I just want to know more about beer. And so I think going into it with that curiosity and openness and like willingness to fail at first so that you can get better is kind of the key.
I have so much to like stay on that. Like, may I? First of all, the whole going out in the world as a mediocre white man, like whenever at my job, like me and my counterpart were the youngest females in a male dominated industry. And whenever she's like, am I being dramatic? I'm like, what would a white man do? What would a white man say? And I don't want to like piss people off by saying that, but it's like we're so conditioned to think like everything we're doing is just being dramatic or emotional. But it's like, yeah, what would a white man do? Just act like that and see if you would still question yourself, you know? And then another time, like I had a reporter reach out to me and it was kind of like, what are your qualifications to post on Instagram about beer? And I literally just want to say, I'm of legal drinking age and I have a taste buds. Like, what qualifications do you need to drink beer and post about it on Instagram? If you want, like, why I can post it on Instagram, well, I don't know. I have a marketing degree, 2 of them actually. I have 7 years of marketing experience. Does that qualify me to run a social media account? I don't know. Like, why do I have to explain myself? And then like I've even thought about doing the Cicerone test too, but then I was thinking that my heart wasn't in the right place because I just wanted that certification so I can be like, well, now I'm qualified to talk about it. You know what I mean? And like no other male influencer on Instagram has to get that qualification just so they can post about it on a free app.
Yeah.
Rant over.
Well, and it's
Sorry.
Well, and it's like the idea that to nod back to the title of this entire festival, if I was a hipster with a fucking beard, I'd be allowed to walk in and order whatever I want. But instead, I walk in as a lady and they're like, are you sure? Are you sure that you want the beer? Should I give you a Cosmo? That seems right. Like,
yeah, I mean,
cool.
even just like, you know, qualifying, like we're calling this the Women in Beer social media panel, but a lot of times we refer to as like female or, you know, Instagram influencers, but like, or female brewers, you know, but that shouldn't even need to be a qualification, right? You know, I talk to a lot of brewers in the industry that are like, I just want to be a brewer. I'm just like everyone else. Like I brew. Gender does not play into that at all. And so, you know, that's really the stereotype that we're trying to break in the industry. Alana, I wanted to check in with you because, you know, as the person that's really in control of Lawson's, you know, social media, does any of this, like how you're portraying photos come into account when it comes to, you know, I've seen that your Lawson's Instagram is focused mainly on the beer and just beautiful shots of Vermont. And it has men, it has women. We were talking earlier before the panel started about this really rad shot you had of one of your, I think she's a bartender, and she's on a motorcycle and she's promoting one of your new beers. And you just see her in like this motorcycle helmet and some pigtails and she's just holding the beer out. So does that come into play at all for you at Lawson's?
Yeah, you know, I'm constantly, you know, taking a look at all of our insights and, you know, monitoring our audience. And, you know, we definitely have a higher following of men than women. And, you know, personally for me, being a woman in the industry, like I'm obsessed with getting women in front of my camera as much as possible. I find that, not only is it an opportunity, like I have some incredible friends that I've been like, hey, okay, so 1, you be in a picture for me. 2, I'll give you beer, whatever you want. And 3, let's go have some. You know, for me, beer is all about experiences and being able to take the photography aspect of it and open that up to other women who either like beer or haven't had, you know, Boston's IPA. Like we're really known for our IPAs. They're really hoppy beers and it's an acquired taste. And I find a lot of women who aren't really into drinking beer, it's hard to crack open a sip of sunshine and enjoy it. And so by kind of opening up this world with my camera and utilizing these photos on social media, I've been able to get, you know, a lot of my friends or, you know, just acquaintances really into the craft beer world and really starting to appreciate, you know, beer for the flavor and not just, you know, you're going to grab a pack of Bud Light for the weekend and go party. It's really about like the quality of the beer that you're drinking. And it goes hand with the experiences that you have. And so anytime I can get a woman of the camera, I'm like, let's do it. And one of our co-founders is Karen Lawson. And, you know, having a woman who's, you know, the head of this company is just very empowering. We've done, you know, we brewed a beer for Pink Boots this past March and proceeds went to Women's Fund. And we at our tap room, we Sunshine Fund, and instead of in lieu of tips, like our beer tenders are paid livable wages and benefits, and in lieu of tips, if anyone leaves a tip, each month we choose a new organization, and we've been fortunate enough to choose, a handful of women's organizations to, donate money to. So, women in the beer industry for us at Lawson's is huge, and anytime I can convince someone to model for me, I'm all for it.
I love that example you just gave about how you're using beer to create change in your community, because that's what I think is so powerful about beer. Similar to food, it has this ability to bring us all together, whether that's for a meal or whether that's enjoying an amazing shot that someone has taken on Instagram, or whether that's using beer to like create a benefit beer like you are, to donate money towards a certain organization or a certain cause. So kind of on that note, how can we as women in the industry turn that around and use our own platforms to create that change? So, we're obviously at Hop Culture. We have this wonderful festival, Beers Without Beards. But for all of you, you have a really big platform in order to push out your own voice. So what are some actual like concrete ways that we can invite more women to drink and work in beer? Is it by using a hashtag? I like to refer to, Ellie Trax, who's a really great Instagram influencer out there as well. She started this hashtag Women Crush Wednesdays, where she posts on Wednesday with that hashtag. So what are some other ideas about how we can use our platforms to get more women involved in the industry? And Helen, I'll start it off with you, because we haven't heard from you in a little bit.
Honestly, the first thing that pops in my head is, it's not really like a movement of types or anything, but it's us as women continuing to support the women in the industry. It's not something big. It's not something, difficult. It's just when you see these new people coming into our community, it's you support them. You be their hype person. What's that word? Words are hard. You bring them up in any way that you can. And for me, and coming back after my break, the females that had followed me before were there cheering me on, and it made coming back that much sweeter, because like I was like, oh man, I'm gonna come back now and seem like a poser, and like, I've been out of the game for so long, and now it's just I'm coming back to be what? And I was so nervous, but the females that were there still, without a beat, just were there to bring me up and support me. And I think just offering that support to other women as they come on board is something, like I said, so easy, and it's huge.
Yeah. Alicia, you look like you had something that you might want to add to the conversation.
I have so many things to add. From a Work for Your Beer perspective, we recognize that we have a platform of about 25,000 followers who, it's really fun to share pictures of gorgeous beer or of people doing a workout in a brewery warehouse. Like, people love that stuff and it resonates, but also we have a responsibility to use that platform to create the change that we want to see in the world. And so, when all of the protests started after the George Floyd murders, we shared as many Black-owned breweries as we could find, because we thought that was a cause that needed our support. This month is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so 100% of the proceeds of the Work for Your Boobies merch in our shop, which is our logo on each boob, goes to the nonprofit Beer for Boobs, which raises money for the American Cancer Society. And so I think we frequently see, okay, like, we're getting a lot of interaction and engagement on these posts, and that's awesome. But how do we take that from just like being a fun number that we can share with potential partners to, hey, we're actually using this platform for good and to create change? And so I think there's that component of it. I also think, to Helen's point, hell yeah, gas up other women. Like, we constantly share people's stuff in our story that we're like, look at this amazing post and look at that amazing post and go follow this person. And like, the Follow Friday movement, I think, is so exciting, because it's like, hey, we love following this person, go follow them too. Like, we should not be your only resource for information on this topic. Dear God, like, we're still learning. But like, if you can go follow these other people, you'll be so much more educated, entertained, excited, like just a part of this big community where we all get together and just like support each other and cheer each other on. It's really exciting.
Yeah, Alicia, I'm glad you brought up that post about work for your boobies, because I was going to talk about that. A little bit. But yeah, it's just, as you were saying, we have this opportunity to create these posts that, create conversations and create change. So you got into it a little bit, but I really wanted to create kind of I have a more overall question just for all of you. Has there been one post that you have put out there, maybe that's been controversial or that stirred up a lot of conversation or that supported one initiative that you're super proud of? And could you share it with us and tell us a little bit more about the story behind that post? Yeah, I mean, Alicia, if you want to kick us off with work for your boobies.
Yeah, well, it's been so funny. Well, I also know, I think, what Melissa's going to say about her own post. I'm very excited for you to tell this story. But from our perspective, a lot of what we hear from when we'll talk to men. So Mel and I travel to breweries all around the country and we taste all their beers and we get really excited about it. A lot of the times the men are like, oh, you're a girl influencer in the beer space. That must just mean that you're posting a can in between your tits at all moments, right? And I'm like, you know what? No, we're not doing that. We could. Our tits are great. Girls are hot. But we're not going to. And you know what? When we do choose to use our bodies to promote a post, we do so very intentionally. And so right now we have that merchandise that supports Work for Your Boobies and supports Beer for Boobs and supports breast cancer awareness. Because you know what? It's a body. Like, it shouldn't be this big deal. Everyone should be fine with the fact that like women have boobs. Aside from that, though, it's just us posting about causes that we're passionate about. Like, we're not all always going to agree politically, but when we posted after the George Floyd murders and we said, like, here are our commitments as a company to being actively anti-racist, and we got people saying unfollow, unsubscribe, and my response was always, please feel free to. Like, if you're not here to support all people, we are not excited to have you here. And so I think that component of things is just like, if you can't see how what we're doing is supporting human rights overall, then we're not excited to have you be a part of this community. We want a community where everyone is valued, everyone is loved, everyone has rights. And so I think it's kind of both of those posts have been our most controversial, but probably the post that I'm proudest of. Like, I think those can go hand in hand for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm excited now to hear, Melissa, what's the post that Alicia's referring to, or do you have another one in mind?
They're both around the same thing, really. Boobies, sure. Yeah. But I kind of wanted to touch on your last question, which directly relates to my answer to this question. And one thing we don't really talk about very much is like internalized misogyny and sexism, like among like women. I do believe in empowering other women and hyping them up and sharing them. But I've always worked in male dominated industries, like whether it was oil and gas or craft beer or hospitality. And like sexism from men, like it's kind of expected. So you just kind of deal with it. But when it comes from other women, it is so disheartening and so like it's fucked up, to say the least. It's like, the reason why I think it happens is because it's always been so much competition. Like, there's only one seat at the table for women, I guess. Like, and we have to fight for that. So instead of making our table bigger or pulling up more chairs, we're trying to knock someone out of there so we can rise to the top. And that's how I see it. And that's the reason why there is such like internalized misogyny, and women aren't even aware of it because we're just socialized to be that way. And once you are self-aware of it, you can take steps towards like understanding why that's happening and how you can overcome it. And one of my controversial posts was, I was invited to Montana for a local beer show and as a like guest host. And this particular episode was going to feature 3 female head brewers in all of Montana. And when I got asked about like being on the show, I didn't disclose where I worked anyway. I never disclosed where I worked on social media just because I want to keep my private and like business life personal and separated from my girl with beer brand. But once the host told me about it, I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. Like, what an awesome concept. And I work in marketing full time for a brewery. So like I can bring that perspective outside of being a social media influencer and doing this like on my spare time. When I got there, the day before the shoot, he was like, hey, the other women dropped out because they didn't think you represented women in beer because of your post. And I was just blown away because I was like, how do I not represent women in beer when I'm a woman working full time in the craft beer industry? And in my spare time, I'm building my own brand, like promoting all these other local breweries. Like, how am I not that? Because I have cleavage. Like, I don't dress differently for Instagram. I dress the way I do. And if I wanted to be policed for the way I dressed and portrayed myself, like, I wouldn't live in North America. Like, like, what the fuck? Like, so that I made a post about that, and some people were, siding with them because they were also making it seem like, oh, I came for a free trip, blah, 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 like whatever. And it's like, no, I was invited for whatever reason. And for you to say I don't represent women in the industry is mind-boggling to me and dismissing me. And they, like, after I made that post, they were like, well, there was so many different reasons for why we dropped out of the show, and we didn't know you worked in beer. I was like, cool. So you judged me on nothing before getting to know me, but you were able to find my email address like literally the 30 seconds after I made the post to tell me that. So that got a lot of attention. It got shared a lot. And honestly, silver lining, I got more followers from it, I guess. And I was able to open up the conversation that this was happening. And to me, it's like, I don't know, like, I see new accounts popping up every day. And to me, I don't look at it as like, oh my God, I have more competition now. People aren't going to care about my post. I look at it as like, this community is growing and more and more women are getting interested. And I don't care if it's because they want to build a following. I'm just excited that there's more women. Like, I remember a few years ago going to beer festivals, being excited because like the bathroom line doesn't exist for women, which is awesome. Doesn't happen anywhere else. Now there are lines. I mean, prior to COVID. And I was kind of like, man, this is good, but also like, I really have to pee and I don't want to wait in line anymore, So to me, I look at someone new and I'm like, how can I support you? How can I, like, I'll share their posts on my stories all the time. And my friends, and I became friends with these women over the internet because we communicated together. It wasn't like, oh, how can they help me grow my following? It was like, I have interests similar to yours outside of craft beer. And I love accounts that share more than just the beer because I want to know the person, And for me, like, one of the critiques I get is like, your beer descriptions are just generic or they're very short. And to me, beer has always been about the experiences around it. So I keep my posts about that. And I want the beer to be like, the descriptions to be approachable and be, inclusive to anyone, someone that's just starting their craft beer journey or someone that's been like drinking for 20 years, So yeah, that is my, I feel like I speak a lot. I'm sorry, guys. I just talk a lot.
Melissa, there's a lot to unpack there, but I liked what you were really saying there at the end about how, you see all these new accounts that are popping up, and Helen, you mentioned it too when you came back. You saw all these new accounts, and your top goal is just to foster them and to be a resource. As now kind of you're an expert in the industry. I remember when I started out, I started out working as a rep, just selling beer for a small brewery in Chicago, and that's what I love so much about craft beer is that all people I'd meet out on my route, we weren't competitors. I didn't consider us competitors. I considered us more neighbors because everyone was just looking to help each other and kind of rise. I like to say we're like a rising tide lifting all boats in this industry. So with that in mind, I'd love to hear, like, for anyone that's listening out there who either wants to start their own Instagram, already has their own, they're just looking for a little bit more advice. Helen, could you kind of tell us a couple, like, what are your top 2 tips or pieces of advice for someone that's looking to either grow or start their own Instagram?
The first tip that I would have is engagement. React and interact with your followers and watch their stories, respond to their stories. It's like we've all said, it's more than just the content that we post. It's, getting to know somebody, wanting to know more about them. That would be my first and most important tip is, get to know the women that you see and try to interact with them as much as you can. My second tip, I'm a hashtag lover. I love hashtags. I do think they really help. And if you have your Instagram account set to the business side of it, you can see just how well your hashtags do work. It's something very simple. You can play around with it, find what works best for you and your account. And
awesome. Alana, what are some pieces of advice that you have? I mean, the photography, on the Lawson's Finest homepage is just, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. So what are some tips?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, my background's photography, and so I can't stress that enough, that imagery and video and the quality of that is super important. Over the span of my career in photography, I, depending upon the project, I have various styles for whatever I'm creating. And so I think it's super important to be able to, go into this with creating your own style and really sticking to that and being consistent with your content. And, just to note back on what Helen said, the connection piece with the people on the other side of their phone and their computer and stuff like that, it's huge. From a brewery's perspective, there's definitely like a little bit of fandom, and people are so thrilled when you like reshare their picture and or you respond to their story or you respond to their comment. And from my perspective, started with Lawson's, I was like, I want to humanize this brand even more than it already is. Like, I want you guys to look at this brand and see the people behind it and see the heart and the soul that goes into it. It's not just about the beer. It's not just about the product. It's about everyone that makes up this. And so having those connections and those conversations with people goes a long way.
Nice. I feel like we could probably talk for like 5 more hours for like the rest of the day, but we have about 8 minutes left. So I wanted to leave a little bit of a time for a Q&A just for people out there that have any questions. And I know some have been dropping some in the comments, but just a quick reminder, if you guys have some questions that you would like to ask any of these lovely ladies, please drop those in the comment bar now, and we'll try to circle around to them. I had one here that I want to pull up. Where is it? Oh, yes. Okay. So I think this actually is a nice tie-in to what we've been talking about. But if there's one thing that you could tell your followers related to your beer endeavors, what would it be? Since this is from Alicia, why don't you kick us off with this one?
Gladly. I would say, as far as my beer endeavors go, I think it's really important to go into a situation at like a new brewery or at a new, in a new state where the laws might be different or whatever. Like, I'm thinking of going to Georgia and they have this weird law where you have to pay for a tasting versus like for a pint. It's very strange. Just going with an open mind, like recognize that your experience in your home state isn't always like the only experience that there is. Recognize that beers are going to be very different from one state to the next, city to the next, brewery to the next, country to the next, and just be ready to try it. Like, if you hate a beer, no one's going to be mad at you. You don't have to like what other people on Instagram like. Like, I still have not gotten into sours, and I'm so sorry, but like, it's just not my vibe. You don't have to like IPAs. You don't have to like, what everyone says is the best beer at a brewery. You can go in and just have an open mind, experience it, and make your own opinion from there. I think as long as you're willing to get to know the people in the industry, to get to know the people around you at the bar, you're in a good spot. Like, I think being open-minded is kind of the key when it comes to the craft beer community overall, like recognizing anyone's allowed to be here, making them feel welcome, and just being willing to learn, I think goes a really long way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of also goes into this question here from JW Richard. Melissa, I think I'm going to kick this one over to you, but social media can be kind of this guessing game sometimes, right? Like, why does one post gain more likes or comments than the others? And I know we were talking about, not getting super hyper focused on the quantity, but more on the quality of your posts. But, what are some posts or campaigns that you've shared that have really resonated with your audience?
Honestly, I was going to say, like, social media is a guessing game. It is. Like, when you think you figured it out, everything changes. So what you can do is collect data, go through your month and see what worked and what didn't, and try to create more content along the lines of what worked for you. So for me personally, like when I started sharing my workouts, that got so much engagement because it showed people like, I would get like questions like, how do you drink so much and eat so much and like don't like, still stay fit? And I'm like, well, like this is how I do it. And like I'm a competitive power lifter. So like for me, I put in a lot of work in the gym and I have a huge appetite. That's the reason why. So like I think it showed a different perspective to my followers, like what I was doing. It also was a little different than the constant beer selfies I was posting. So it just made them kind of see a different side of me. And, once I saw that kind of performed better on my channel, I started incorporating more of my training and that got a lot more attention too. So I think finding something that differentiates you in a sea of the sameness is going to go a long way. So any like posts or campaigns I've worked on differentiate, and that will push you further. And experiment. Like there's a formula, but that formula keeps changing, so don't be so attached to it and be willing to like fail every once in a while. That's how we learn.
Yeah. Helen, what about you? What are some posts that have really resonated with your audience?
I've realized lately, like trying to get further back into the game, like we've said already, you have to keep an open mind and you have to be able to roll with the punches and don't expect something to work all the time. Because I will create a post and think like, yes, this is so great. This is awesome. People are going to engage. People are going to like it. It's going to start this topic, like conversation, and then nothing happens. And I'm like,
yeah. And then you post like the worst photo of yourself that you think is terrible, and all of a sudden it blows up.
Yes.
You just have to roll with the punches. There isn't a specific post that I can think of right now that was really, I don't remember the word that you said. I don't remember. Like a post that has
controversial.
Yes, that. But like just piggybacking it is, you have to just relax and go with the flow. But keep in mind the things that work all the time don't work all the time.
Yeah,
also, like,
I think. Oh no, go
I know
for
I
it.
talk a lot, but like you have to show up, even if like your post fails, like or it doesn't do as well. Like you don't just throw away your following. Like you have to show up because these people who have followed you thought you were interesting enough, or your brand was interesting enough to commit to following you. So just because something doesn't work, or like you're not growing as fast as you used to, or you're losing followers, doesn't mean there are still people who aren't interested in what you have to say. And I think that's what, like, at least in my circle, like people get so like demotivated because Instagram keeps changing. But you have to, like, that's going back to the community. You have to show up for your community. They're there for you, and you don't just ghost them because a post didn't do well or the algorithm changed.
I think that is an absolutely beautiful way to wrap up this panel because, as we all know, COVID has had a huge effect on everything that, has happened this year, including Beers Without Beards. I mean, we had plans to host this festival in person in New York for the third straight year and then bring it out to the West Coast for the first time. It's actually one of the reasons that I moved out to the West Coast. And then obviously this COVID coaster, threw us a huge curveball and we had to adapt. We had to roll with the punches, choose your phrase or buzzword that you want to insert there. And we made it into a digital festival because we knew it was just such an important event that we didn't want to just, say, hey, like there's been a pandemic, we can't host this event this year. Instead, we, rolled with it and we created this wonderful panel that you guys have all been a part of. So I'm going to wrap things up here, but I just want everyone to go around one more time. If people have questions or if we didn't get to anything or they want to follow up with you, I know your handles are on the screen, but just tell us one more time, where can people reach out to you and how can they get in touch with you? Helen, you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So my handle is @hopsnobbery. It's right there. You can reach me there through DMs or you can always email me. My email is totalhopsnobbery@gmail.com.
Yeah. Perfect. Alana, how about you? How can we reach you?
You guys can get in touch with me on Lawson's social media, which is the handle is Lawson's Finest. And my email is at lawsonsfinest.com.
Sweet. Alicia, what about you?
You can find me at Work for Your Beer or shoot me an email anytime at alicia@workforyourbeer.com. And I'd love to chat genuinely about anything. Let's do it.
Cool. And Melissa?
On
Take us home.
Instagram, I'm the girl with beer, and I also have a YouTube channel called The Girl with Beer where I share my travel videos. And yeah, just hit me up on Instagram. I would love it if you guys can comment on like the last photo I shared saying that you were part of this panel so we can connect. That'd be really cool. I'd like to see who's on there too. So yeah, just leave me a comment on a photo or send me a DM. I'd love to connect.
Amazing. That's what it's all about, making these connections through beer in the industry. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us all today. That's going to wrap up our Women in Beer social media panel, but stick with us. In about 15 minutes or so, we have an amazing keynotes presentation coming up from New Belgium. So Katie Wallace, who manages their diversity and inclusion program, is going to speak with us about how she essentially started that initiative from the ground up. And then Patrice Palmer, who is New Belgium's first diversity and inclusion specialist, will be chatting about how they are creating these programs at New Belgium to create a more equitable, diverse, and just environment in a brewery, and how other people can bring that back to their own communities and their own breweries. So thank you again, ladies. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys hopefully at the keynote presentation in about